This is the second lightning talk session featuring a fantastic group of students who are going to share their data science work. So happy to have you all join us this afternoon. Next slide. So our first speaker is Delany Bradford, who's at Morehouse School of Medicine. And he's going to talk about, can biotechnology be the answer to HIV? Delany?
Yes, thank you for that wonderful introduction. I hope you all are having a great afternoon. And so, as she stated, yes, we are going to talk about whether biotechnology can be the answer to HIV. And we are about to explore an out-of-the-box approach to treating HIV with nutraceuticals. And so we are about to explain how and what these pictures are and how they are relevant to HIV. Next slide, please. So our executive summary is basically comprised of our background, the problem, and our proposed conclusion. So the background, what exactly were those pictures of? Well, I'm glad you asked. So that was a picture of a bitter melon fruit, and it actually comes from the genus Momordica. And we looked at two specific species. One of them is the Balsamina species, and the other one is the Charantia species. And within those species, there is a particular protein known as the MOMO30 protein. And this protein has very beneficial retroviral effects, and that is what we are using and researching to treat HIV positive patients. So the current problem with the treatment for and therapy for HIV is the amount of drugs that are taken by these patients. They take a plethora of pills to combat the various symptoms that HIV patients deal with. And within these pill cocktails, if you will, some of them include antidiarrheal or antiemetic drugs, because those are some of the symptoms and side effects that come from the therapy that they're taking to help with their HIV. Next slide, please. So you heard me say earlier nutraceutical or biologic. So what exactly is that? Well, a biologic is we use the word biologic to describe our therapy because it comes from a plant. It comes from a life form. And I just want to right there say thank you to Prometra or Prometra. So Prometra stands for the Promotion of Medicine and Treatment from Africa. And their primary mission is to preserve the African traditional medicine and culture and overall indigenous medicine. So we want to thank them for their help with this as well. So moving on to nutraceutical, what exactly is that? Well, that describes the medicinal properties that this protein and this overall supplement will have. Next slide, please. So the main question, does it work and can you prove it? Well, yes, I can. And thank you for asking. So as you can see here, these graphs depict the overall result of the actual research. So as you can see in the figure 14A and 14B, this graph is showing you how the viral load of these patients have decreased over time when they were given the supplements with the protein extracts MOMO30. And as you can see over to the right in the green and blue depiction at the top, you have a depiction of the actual mechanism. So if you look at the small blue little dots, that is actually depicting our MOMO30 protein, and it is actually acting as a block or repressor, because it is blocking the green, which is depicting the virus, from binding to to a cell, and in this case it is a CD4 helper T cell. Next slide, please. So overall, I want to thank the rest of my team who is listed here. We would also like to thank the Morehouse School of Medicine for the opportunity and for the um, uh, actual research grants, and also funding collaborators such as the NIH and various HIV and HIV/AIDS health nonprofits. Thank you.
Thank you. That's great work there. Our next speaker is Joshua Curry, who's at Morehouse College, and he's going to talk to us a little bit about open doors by open source. Joshua?
Hi, thank you for the introduction. I am Joshua Curry. I'm a senior software engineering major at Morehouse College, and I'll be talking about the Open Doors by Open Source program. Next slide, please. So, what is Open Doors by Open Source? This is a program hosted by the AUC Data Science Initiative with the goal of diversifying the computing workforce by offering technical opportunities and resources to Black students who are near graduation or had just graduated. And in the program, we learned about some open source development topics and a lot of software engineering methodology. In learning these, we also applied the skills to in making projects, and in those projects we could show to potential employers. And there were a lot of sessions where current industry professionals came and talked to the participants about any number of topics, whether that was technical interview prep or just like daily life as a software engineer. Next slide, please. And one of the projects that we worked on was or my team specifically, was a project. Some of the other options were bingo, I believe, and other like board game types. And the objective of this project was kind of a refresher on some object-oriented programming practices. And in this project, we had to work collaboratively using Slack and Git and GitHub. The team also was self-organizing. So the only thing that we were given was a technical design document that kind of laid out what we needed to put in the project, the features that were necessary, and things of that nature. And the team was 4 students. So I worked with 3 other students, and we got this project done. And so that was something that we could put up on our GitHub and talk to employers about. Next slide, please. And the next project, which was the final project for the program, was we had to create another game, but these games were a bit more complex in nature. And so our group had Black Card Revoked. It's pretty much a card game about Black culture. And so the players answer questions on the cards, and at the end of the game, the person with the most points wins. We were also given a technical design document for this project. The difference between this one and the previous is that this team was larger. So I worked on a team of 5 people this time. We still had to work collaboratively using Git and GitHub. This time you could change, there was a potential change of team members and programming language. So for the Connect 4 project, our team used Python. We also decided to use Python again because we were just more comfortable with it, but we had the option to change to another programming language. And our team, I decided to stick with my old team, and so we just added 1 new member. And this was more of a technical challenge because of the nature of the game, and the technical design document laid out a bit more features and requirements for this project. Next slide, please. And so now I'll talk about the open doors. So immediately following this program, which ended in August, I think a week before school started, I started interviewing with a company for a software engineering position. And I did land the internship after the program. And I think what helped me was the technical interview prep that the program provided. The company that provided it was Carrot, and we had about 4 interviews throughout the summer. And then we also had access to their Brilliant Black Minds program, which is a program they're doing in a few weeks, actually, with has more technical interview prep. Also, the software engineering practices that I learned during the program are implemented every day at the company that I worked at. It's a startup called Compa, and so Open Doors by Open Source was a fantastic experience. I'm very glad I did it, and it landed me a internship. So it was a good experience.
Congratulations. Where's the internship?
Thank you. It's with a company called Compa. They work on software that helps recruiters make better offers. So
Nice. Congratulations.
thank you.
Great work there, Joshua. Now I also must say he was an esteemed panelist this summer in the pre-freshman summer experience program where he gave the students tidbits for success. So thank you for sharing your work this past summer.
Of course. Thank you.
Great. Our next speaker is Lexcia Carr, who's a student at Spelman College, and she's going to talk to us about urban displacement in American neighborhoods. Lexcia?
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for that introduction. My name is Lexcia Carr, and I'm a senior biology major at Spelman College, and today I will be talking to you about urban displacement in American neighborhoods. So better known as gentrification, urban displacement is a trend common in communities of lower economic class and oftentimes has racial implications as well. This past summer, you can go back to the previous slide. Thank you. This past summer, I was afforded the opportunity to complete research with the Spelman College Data Science Research Program, where I learned about data science and its application to a multitude of careers and studies. Further, I worked alongside some of my Spelman siblings to investigate gentrification and its effect on communities. Next slide, please. Focusing specifically on Atlanta and Washington, D.C., we culminated data regarding population size, income, and other demographics over the course of 20 years. Our findings confirm that gentrification is harmful to low income and Black and Brown families, even if it's not malicious in its initial intent. In these pictures, we see the Georgia Dome, which is now the Mercedes-Benz Stadium. And as residents, students, employees of the West End and Atlanta area, we know that the demolition of this stadium, alongside the demolition of a multitude of Black churches and communities, was and is a marker of gentrification in this area. In the other picture, there's a pan view of the intersection of 5th and I Street, Southeast Washington, D.C., and the changes that have happened in that area and on that specific street in a matter of 20 years. And if you look close enough in the middle of the photo, I'm not sure if you all can see it, you can see the Capitol building, which exemplifies that this picture was in fact taken in the exact same place, just in 2 very different times in history. So I'll give you all a couple seconds to, it's right behind a bridge, right down the middle of the street, to your right, if you are trying to look for that. Next slide, please. So let's look at some of the facts, specifically in the community I focused on in my research and a community I am more personally connected with. The Arthur Capers community in the Navy Yard neighborhood of Southeast Washington, D.C. was catered to a large number of African-American families from the mid-20th century up until its demolition in 2006. For me specifically, it was home to my babysitter, Miss Jenny, who I remember hanging a pink slip on her before having to move forever from a place I knew as home. Ms. Jenny was one of the 60% of African-American families moved out between 1990 and 2018. And the average income for this area skyrocketed over that time, more than 350%. An initiative called the Hope 6 Initiative was then introduced to the Arthur Capers community in 2000 as a project for change and uplifting the community. And while houses were provided, the rent increased, causing a 300% increase in housing availability in a community that was once overcrowded. And so The same community saw an influx in persons with high school diplomas, as well as the poverty decreased over these years. And so while this sounds good from a statistical standpoint, ethically, all needs were not met because the people who were initially in these communities were moved out for other people to come in. And because of this, in our research, we use both quantitative and qualitative statistics to make our conclusions. And some of the sources I've included are at the top and will be accessible at the end of this presentation. I encourage everyone to indulge in these and their own research. Next quote, next slide, please. So I've included this quote for everyone to reflect on. People bury the parts of history they don't like, pave over it like African cemeteries beneath Manhattan skyscrapers. While this literally depicts the erasure of Black communities for the development of New York City attractions like Central Park, it also highlights the parallels happening in cities everywhere around the United States. I encourage everyone to scan this QR code to start some of their own research and also get some more insight on what my team curated this summer for Atlanta and Washington, D.C. and gentrification in those areas. You can go to the next slide, please. So my call to action to everyone is to research, reflect, and remind. Gentrification is an ongoing trend that continues to displace and destroy communities of people. What can we do as consumers, as neighbors, and as allies? Looking forward, ask yourselves, how can we upgrade older and substandard living conditions in American neighborhoods without displacing those same people who sustain and build the culture of those neighborhoods? Thank you so much.
Thanks you so much, Lexcia. You're solving a very important problem. So thank you for your work. Our next speakers are Victoria Grase and Woomy Michel, who are students at Clark-Atlanta University. They're going to talk to us today about using data analysis to solve human trafficking. Woomy and Victoria? I don't think they're here yet. So let's go ahead and fast forward to Enoch's presentation. Thank you. All right, okay. So Enoch, you ready? We say you always stay ready, right? So you don't have to get ready.
Yes, I think I'm ready. Please let me know if my internet is going in and out, because right now it's kind of looking different on my side.
Okay, but, you're good. You're good. So, yep, you're good. So our next speaker is Enoch Edusei. Thank you for stepping up to the plate. He's a student at Clark-Atlanta University. He's involved in the AUC workshops this past summer, and he's going to give us a talk about mentally dead, on a data analysis. So Enoch, go for it.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Washington, for the introduction. Good afternoon. My name is Enoch Edusei, and I am a sophomore mathematics major at Clark-Atlanta University. So throughout this presentation, I will be showing you how I use data science techniques, including RStudio, to find a link between mental illness and fatal police shootings in the U.S. Next slide. Next slide. So to give you some brief background, can you go before that? Thank you. So the International Bipolar Foundation states that people with untreated mental illness are 16 times more likely to be fatally shot during an encounter with the police. The NYCPD also reported that in 2015, they responded to more than 400 mental health calls daily. This has drawn controversy from the public, for while not all of these mental illness calls are violent or dangerous, when the police respond to the scene rather than departments such as the EMT, this can make it seem otherwise. Next slide. Mental health is another underlying issue that affects the African American community. The National Alliance on Mental Illness, or NAMI, concluded that 63% of African Americans believe that mental illness is just a sign of personal weakness. So this mindset can account for the undiagnosed cases as well, for the people who think like this are also the ones refusing to go seek a doctor or therapy. And with the study from Psychiatry Online concluding that Black men, who are also arguably the most targeted group by the police, are most likely to be misdiagnosed for mental illness, there's definitely some concern on how police should deal with the public. Next slide. In terms of fatal police shootings from 2015 to 2020, is there any evidence showing that mentally ill victims are killed at a higher rate versus non-mentally ill victims? And to figure this out, I will be comparing factors such as whether the victims were armed, their level of threat, fleeing, if the police had a body camera on them, etc. Next slide. The hypothesis is, yes, there is significant evidence from the data set that shows a correlation between the number of mentally ill victims killed and the threat level that they possessed, in which the mentally ill were seen as more threatening to the police. Therefore, they were killed at a greater rate. Next slide. So with RStudio, I was able to use two methods, data wrangling and exploratory data analysis. So data wrangling is the process of cleaning and unifying complex data sets to better access them visually. So to clean up the data set, I used RStudio and I renamed each column to something simpler, as well as taking out columns that I didn't need. Next slide. So exploratory data analysis is the process of investigating your data to find patterns, outliers, test your hypotheses, etc. So to the right, I have the summary function, which shows various things such as the mean, median, and mode for various factors. And over here is showing the victims' ages, as well as the amount of victims who were or weren't mentally ill. All right, next slide. And now I will be showing you all of the visualizations that I came up with using exploratory data analysis. So to the right, here's a bar graph showing the top 10 weapons of armed victims. This was kind of a given, but the most used weapon was a gun. All right, next slide. To the right, this is a GG plot comparing how many mentally ill versus mentally stable victims fled from the police. It's noted that mentally ill victims fled 10% or 1/10 as much as stable victims. That was interesting to me. Next slide. This is a GG plot showing races of mentally ill versus non-mentally ill victims. So Caucasian or white people were the most killed group in the set, but I feel like this was evident because they are the majority of the US. Next slide. To the right is a GG plot showing the levels of threat, and it is noted that mentally stable victims were more likely to attack when confronted at a rate of 67% versus 61% for mentally ill. So mentally ill victims were less likely to attack the police. All right, next slide. And lastly, here's a correlation plot listing the correlation between mental illness and other characteristics of the victim. So the closer that the number is to 1 on the plot, the higher the correlation between the factors. It is noted that age and tendency to flee, as well as fleeing and showing signs of mental illness, correlated with each other the most, at 21% and 19% respectively. Next slide. So in conclusion, the claim of police killing mentally ill victims at a higher rate is true. When looking at the GG plot earlier, which listed the armed status for each victim, it was evident that the non-mentally ill victims were armed at a greater rate. Therefore, they should be viewed as more of a threat. The bar plots also showed that the mentally ill fled 10% as much as the non-mentally ill did from the police, and they attacked 29% as much as mentally stable victims did. In regards to the race of the victims, it was almost guaranteed that Caucasian people would be the majority of the shooting cases, for like I said previously, they accounted for more than half of the data set. Next slide. The second highest race of shooting victims, however, was African American or Black people. This was interesting, but quite frankly expected as well. Overall, it is shown that the mentally ill victims proved to be less threatening, yet were treated the same, if not more aggressively, and ended up with the same fate as the stable victims. This observation also sheds light on the fact that the U.S. police training system needs some work. So hopefully through data analyses such as these, the government can start taking more action to correct this problem, such as new training programs, passing new bills, etc. Next slide. In the future, I would like to take a look at a data set comparing just African American and Caucasian victims. Since there were various races scattered all throughout the data set, it was hard to come up with a clear. Next slide. I would like to give thanks to my capstone mentor, Ms. Cassandra Parker, as well as Ms. Sanobi Blathers, Ms. Jasmine Brown, Dr. Eric Mintz, Dr. Sandra Rucker, Dr. Talitha Washington, and the rest of the faculty on Clark Atlanta University's Provost Summer Data Science Initiative. Thank you to the Washington Post as well for supplying me with this data set. Next slide. And here are my references. Thank you for your time.
So much, Enoch. That was great and very informative. Thank you for your good work there. So, Doris, if you could, can you back it up
Yes.
to the? Thank you so much. We're gonna go back to Victoria and Woomy. So I think Woomy, you're gonna represent. You ready, Woomy?
I'm still waiting on Victoria.
Well, you can have the rocket, Woomy. If you, I think we said you stay ready, so you don't have to get ready. So our next speaker is Woomy Michel, who's going to hold it down. We believe in you. You can do it. She's going to talk about using data analysis to solve human trafficking. Woomy?
Okay. Hi, I'm Woomy, and I'm using data analysis to solve human trafficking. Next slide.
You can do this. It's okay.
Can I wait for my partner, please?
We're kind of under a time constraint. Victoria, so good to see you. And I think Woomy is happy to see you too.
Yes, I apologize for my delay. I was having a few technical difficulties.
All right, well, great to see you. Take it away, ladies. Let's go. You can do it.
So the purpose of Erase Child Trafficking, it leverages social media to increase awareness of human and child trafficking. So the first is to determine the types of posts that are most successful. Secondly, estimate the value of each type of engagement, likes, comments, etc. And lastly, evaluate post attributes, the use of celebrities that tend to drive more positive results.
Next slide.
So our research question we came up with, are certain words and posts significant when determining the engagement levels on Facebook posts? The hypothesis we concluded is there is a significance that exists between certain words, the types of posts, and the engagement level. Next slide.
So this is our data wrangling. In figure 1, you can see that we're checking for missing values within the data set using the sum and which function. The sum function returns the total number of missing values, and the which function tells you which positions have missing values. And in figure 2, you can see that we're removing the columns, renaming the columns, and capitalizing the values in the columns to standardize the data. Next slide. In figure 3, you can see the original data set before pre-processing. And in figure 4, you can see the data set after pre-processing. We now have a data set that's comprised of 2,400 variables, 2,400 observations, and 9 variables. Next slide.
So words that appear most in the text column when we did our research were share, help, missing, safe, trafficking, ranking in number 1, human trafficking, ranking in number 2, children, teen, suspect, hashtag, please share, and law enforcement.
Next slide.
Next slide.
Okay, so this is the total number of posts by post type. Links were the most used, followed by photo, video, status, and then event. It's important to note that links were possibly one of the most ineffective methods used by Erase child trafficking. Next slide. In figure 6, you can see the total number of posts by year. 2017 had the largest amount of posts. Also, it's important to note that 2021 only contained the first 3 months, so January, February, and March. So the data for 2021 is insufficient, but still you can see a gradual decline when it comes to the number of posts. Next slide. This is our predictive model. This is a linear regression model that we did in R. You can see the training data set in figure 7 and the testing data set in figure 8. Here we checked for the relationship between the words and the engagement levels. Below you can see the equation of the predictive model. Next slide. In this slide, you can see the equation of the predictive model when it comes to the content types. So the various post types. Next slide.
So was our hypothesis proven true after all of this? After according to the data collected, there is supporting evidence for our hypothesis. There's significance that exists for the post type and the words used in the erased child trafficking Facebook post. So using the machine learning models in the previous slide, we discovered that the total engagement reaction shares are statistically significant for the post type. However, there are no values that are statistically significant for the text. Using the chi-squared test, we found that there may be evidence for the null hypothesis when it comes to specific variables. The types of posts that had the highest engagements were photos and images. So keeping that in mind, next slide, please. Where do we go from here? Developing a consistent schedule for uploading new content, increased use of infographics that provides information in a short, concise, and engaging manner, creating or joining a Facebook group to interact with people that share the same goals and interests. We even might throw in a fact of the day post with photos, of course, because that had the most engagement. Collaborate with other nonprofit organizations who share the same goal of erased child trafficking, and using predictive models to determine the success of each Facebook post, which words and posts are most impactful. Next slide. And that concludes our presentation.
Great job, ladies. We know that it's not easy to present. We know that, you all put a lot of work. Jerice, you can stop sharing your screen at this time. Y'all put a lot of work in what you did, and we really appreciate your effort. So great job. Job well done there. And really all speakers, y'all did amazing data science work, and we really appreciate you all taking the time to share it with us. And if you look at the chat, there are people who are corresponding and giving your presentations lots of praise. So I just echo their comments. Everybody did a job well done. So pat yourself on the back and take a deep breath. And I hope you can maybe enjoy some relaxing times in the lounge this afternoon. So we have a little bit of time before our networking session starts. Before our data science panel starts. So we have a bit of a break until 3 o'clock. So if you'd like to kick your feet up in the lounges or check out one of the expos, go for it. Make some connections with the businesses, make some connections with graduate school and ask the questions there. So go ahead and explore the expo, and we'll be back at 3 o'clock with the data science alumni panel. Again, good job, everyone.
Yes, Dr. Washington, one more thing. Could I ask for the slide with my QR code? Someone in the chat asked to see it at the end.
Oh, sure.
I'm not sure how to share myself, so thank you.
You can attach files in the chat. I don't have the image of your
okay.
QR code. You see under type your message here, you can press on the plus button and you can put your QR code right in there. Ooh, there you go. Never mind, you on it. Thanks, Lexi.
Thank you.
Yes, not echo you, Scott. Great presentations all around. You all are really impressive students. So job well done. See y'all at 3 o'clock. And again, hang out, enjoy the expo and the lounges.